and welcome to the Polk Pioneer Oral History Program, a collaboration between the Polk County Historical Association's Heritage Partners, the Polk County History Center, and Polk Government TV. I'm Jennifer Bush, board member of the Polk County Historical Association. Thanks so much for joining us today as I have the pleasure of interviewing Miss Alice Lorraine Peaslee, who was nominated for Polk Pioneer recognition by Historic Lakeland, Inc. First of all, let me say, Miss Peaslee, congratulations on this honor, and I am looking so forward to hearing some of your stories today. So I thought we would start at the very beginning. Tell me about your mother and your father. Who were they? Where did they come from, and what did they do?
Well, I was born in Morgantown, West Virginia, the second child. My mother was from Elkins, West Virginia, and my daddy was from Polk County, West Virginia, Preston County, West Virginia. And they lived in Morgantown when I was born, but later moved to Rollsburg, which was a very small town. My father was a railroader, eventually became an engineer on the B&O Railroad. And my mother did not work after being married. I had an older sister, a brother, and a younger sister. And I went to school in a one-room country school for the first 5 years. And after that, we lived about 8 miles out of the little town. And after that, I was bused into the school in Rollsburg, and that's where I went to high school and graduated from there in 1944. Following my graduation, I went to Washington, D.C. for nurses training. I was 17 years old, never been out of the country. But then again, Washington was not the big place it is now either. And I was there. I remember I was still in high school when Pearl Harbor happened. I was 15 years old, and I wanted to enlist, but I also wanted to have my nursing done. So I went in nurses training in 1944, and graduated in 1947. By that time, the war was over. So I worked there at the hospital where I trained, Gallinger Municipal Hospital in Washington. Worked in obstetrics and surgery until the Korean War broke out. While I was working there were 4 of us who had graduated from the same school, and we got an apartment together. And when the Korean War broke out, we went to the Pentagon and enlisted in the Air Force. 2 of us went to Randolph Field, myself and another one, and 2 of the girls went to Travis in California. I was in the service at Randolph, and then later at College Station, they opened up a base it was a fighter base training, and it had been closed after the war, and they opened it up for the Korean training. And I worked in the hospital, both of those places. And then I left to go overseas in March of 1951, I guess. no, 52. And on arrival in Japan, I was stationed at Tachikawa Air Base, which was about 18 miles out of Tokyo. And we were doing flight nursing, air evacuation.
Okay, so what did that involve?
Okay, we lived in a nurse's residence there, and we were on the roster for flights. We would fly from Tachikawa over to Korea and pick up a load of patients and bring them back to Japan. Then on a rotating schedule, we would be deployed to Korea for 1 month and fly what we called shuttle runs there, flying up to further north strips and picking up fresh casualties and bringing them back to Seoul. We were about a few miles out of Seoul. Yeongdongpo was our station. And then after our month, we would rotate back to Japan. The first group that went to Korea, my roommate was one of them. They were housed in a Quonset hut.
Okay, tell me about that. Describe the Quonset hut.
Well, it was a big, long, roofed-over place, and nothing but cots to sleep on, and no latrine. They had a bucket. Fortunately, when I went, there was a small house that the Red Cross had occupied, and they gave that to the flight nurses. So we had better accommodations there. There was a sad incident in the military. We lost an airplane with 6 patients and 2 flight nurses and a medical tech in Korea. Korea was not just Americans. I remember we had a British flight surgeon, there were Turkish people, and we had some Greek pilots that we flew back in Korea with. And this flight, they had picked up the patients at K-14, which I think was Kempo. It was a fighter base. And by that time, they had some jet fighters. They asked we flew in the old DC-3s, the Goonie Birds in Korea. And they didn't need the long runway, and they asked permission to take off midway on the runway. And we don't know whether it was a language barrier, whether it was a mistake in the tower, but they thought they had been granted permission. They pulled out on the runway, and there was a jet fighter taking off at the far end. And he tried to get over, but hit them, and the whole thing went up. And 2 of those people, one of them, the nurse, was from Morgantown. She had worked in the hospital in Morgantown with my sister. The medical tech was from Elkins, where my mother had been born. And when I came home, they gave me plaques, and I had to visit each of those families. But it was a real tragedy. Mm. I never felt afraid flying, never even considered that anything would happen to me.
I was going to ask that earlier. I mean, what to me would just take so much courage, just daily living there, knowing what you were facing and what you were in the midst of.
We didn't have any contact with the enemy. We used to, when we were in Korea, they had what they called Bed Check Charlie. And an observation plane from the north would fly down. But we were never under attack from the air when I was over there.
It must have been something instilled in you from your growing up, your mom and dad, that you had the guts and the gall to enroll in the military, and then boom, now you're over here in a completely different state from where, I mean, it just sounds on your own too. That's just amazes me.
Well, the whole country was at war during the Second World War. Now, it was different for Korea and for Vietnam. There was rationing. People were employed in factories for building planes, ammunition, and everything. And almost every family had somebody in the service. So the whole country was extremely patriotic. I loved flying. As a matter of fact, while we were waiting between wars, one of my roommates and I took flying lessons right outside of Washington, D.C. in a little plane. I said, I had soloed a plane before I ever learned to drive a car. Eventually, I learned to drive a car in Washington, D.C. But flying didn't shake me up nearly as much as learning to drive. But I loved flying. And that was one of the things when I went to go overseas was I wanted to get in with an evacuation outfit. In July of 1953, I came back from Korea to Columbus, Ohio, and was separated from the service, still inactive reserve, subject to recall, but not maintaining an active status. From there, I went to, I went home for a little while and applied for anesthesia training in St. Louis. And I started there in September of 1954.
What appealed to you about that specific field of medicine?
I had observed nurse anesthetists doing that work when I was working at Gallinger. And I thought, I think I could do this. And another thing that appealed to me was I didn't want to be in a supervisory position in nursing. That didn't appeal to me. I wanted to do my own work. And you pretty much are on your own in anesthesia. So I went out there and I graduated from there after 18 months. And again, I went back home for a brief time and started looking for job openings. And I had been to Florida, I think it was 1948. One of my roommates was from Clearwater. We came down here on the train, three of us, and rented a little 2-bedroom house out on the beach at Clearwater. There were no big hotels, nothing. It was deserted. We rented that for $35. And I just fell in love with Florida. I thought it was so beautiful. And when I was at Randolph, I was deployed to Montgomery, once for officer training and once for flight nurse school. And we would run down to Panama City on the weekends.
Yeah.
So again, I liked Florida, and I asked for job openings. And there was one in Jacksonville, one in St. Augustine, and the one in Lakeland. Well, I stopped in Jacksonville on the way down, but the hours were longer and the pay was not the greatest, and I didn't want that far north, really, in Florida. I thought I wanted the beach. I'm so glad I didn't get on the beach. When I got to St. Augustine, that position had already been filled. So I came on to Lakeland and interviewed. Mr. Smith was the administrator, and got hired and just stayed. I didn't go back home or anything. And started work at Morrell. At that time, the hospital was 4 floors, I guess. First and second floors were wards. One was for men, one for women. I don't think there were any private rooms there, as I remember. Then the third floor was surgery, and then the fourth floor was pediatrics. The maternity ward was again in a Quonset hut that had been refitted outside the hospital, and the segregation was still in fact at that time, and the colored division was in another Quonset hut. We had the delivery room in this Quonset hut, and I think there were some private rooms in that area. If a patient had to go to surgery from OB, we put them on a stretcher and took them outside and up on the elevator to surgery. If it was raining, we had a big plastic sheet to cover them. The colored division had their own delivery room, so we would go over there if there was a black lady delivering.
Now what? Now, so this was Morrell. This was called Morrell Hospital, and what is it? Was it where the hospital is today? Was it
the grounds? Yes.
Okay.
None of the buildings are there anymore. Not the nurses' residence or the hospital at all. It's all gone.
And tell me about the nurses' residence.
It was adjacent to the hospital. The first floor was just a large living room, and then the rooms, you had just a bedroom and a closet. And I lived there the first year. As I said, there were no apartments to rent. And the girl that became our chief nurse, the anesthetist, lived in a little villa-like that a man had built out on the far end of North Florida, right where it comes into Lakeland Hills. And he was building some apartments. So after a year, I moved out there into one of those.
But I bet when you were in that nursing, the nursing quarters, you made a lot of friends there. Was it very y'all were all doing the same things and you related? Tell me what were your memories about the other nurses that were there?
Well, one of the nurses that worked in OB lived there. One of the girl that was the operating room supervisor lived there, Tony Gunnan and Stella Marquez. And a couple of nurses that had come from up north, Iowa, I believe, very shortly after I had come there, lived there. As a matter of fact, one of those ladies and I bought a boat together. We loved water ski. The nurses that worked on OB at that time, Bessie Cook and Becky Ogden, were two of the older or longest employees at Lakeland at Morrell. And Becky used to take me fishing. And later, when we had the new hospital with the new surgery and everything, Bessie became the recovery room nurse. We didn't have a recovery room in the old Morrell. You took the patient down to the ward, and the nurse that was on charge there took care of them. The new hospital was built that became Lakeland General, and eventually it was built south of Morrell, just attached to that. But eventually, then Morrell was totally dismantled, and so was the nurses' residence. The new surgery at that time was on the first floor. Then later it moved up to the fourth floor, and obstetrics was, I believe, on the fourth floor at that time. Everything has changed so much, I would get lost in there now.
Well, going from Morrell, to Lakeland General, that was a big change.
Yeah.
That was
yes.
That was a big change.
Yes, indeed. So from there on, I worked there for 34 years and retired in 1989, but worked part-time until I could get on Medicare. I think I was 62 when I first retired, and I worked part-time for health benefits, for one thing.
Now, that would have been, by that time, it was Lakeland, had it become Lakeland Regional?
Lakeland Regional.
So you saw that hospital go from, you saw 3.
Yes. As a matter of fact, Watson Clinic was in the Marble Arcade building downtown at the time I first started working.
And the Marble Arcade building, what road was that on? Was that right there around Munn Park?
It was either on Florida Avenue or Tennessee, one of those. I think it was on Florida Avenue.
Well, during your career, walk us through a day in the life of an anesthesia nurse. Am I saying, was that
yes.
the title, anesthesia? Walk us through the life, a day in the life of an anesthesia nurse. What was that like?
We were booked for what we call cases. The operating room nurse, the in-charge nurse, made out the schedule, and we would know the night before what cases we were scheduled for the next day. We worked in shifts. One day we would be working 7 to 3, or 3:30. And maybe the next day we came on at 3:30 and worked until morning. Be on call. We had a call room where we could spend the night and be available. So if we were booked for cases, you got yourself in there beforehand so that you would have everything ready when the doctor got there, and put the patient to sleep, and then you delivered them to the recovery room to wake up, and went on to the next one. If you were working the 3:30 till morning shift, after you would do cases that were booked late in the day up until 5 or so, and be available for emergencies and for obstetrics, and you would be expected to what we call make rounds, visit all the patients that were scheduled for the next day, take some history, instruct them about nothing to eat or drink after midnight, and so forth.
How did you handle that crazy work schedule?
I scheduled my life around my work schedule. Like the weekends I worked, I couldn't go to church. I didn't have as busy a personal life at that time. There weren't a lot of demands, but I did start bowling. But again, that bowling schedule had to depend on my work schedule. So if I was scheduled to work, I would be absent from that.
What did you, in activities like that, did it involve your other nurse friends, people that you worked with, or was it a completely different group of friends?
The bowling, the girl that was the chief nurse anesthetist was bowling, and the first game I ever bowled was in Japan. When we weren't scheduled for a flight, we were on our own. We didn't have any other duties. We played bridge. And they decided we needed some activities, so we were given a choice of golf or bowling, so I chose bowling. And I bowled my first game over there, and I didn't bowl anymore then until I came to Lakeland, and Mildred was a bowler, and so she took me bowling. At that time, there was only one bowling lane in Lakeland, and it was on West Memorial Boulevard, and it eventually burned. And I remember we had to finish out our league. One time we went to Plant City, and another time we started our league over in Winter Haven, and then they built Lakeland lanes, and we bowled out there. But that was how I started in bowling.
There were a couple of things I wanted to ask about the hospital. We were talking about the hospital,
Okay.
and how different it was, and how it changed. And I was trying to remember, what were they called? Candy stripers? Do you know anything
yes.
about candy? Can you tell me what were the candy stripers?
Those were high school girls who were volunteers at the hospital. And of course, they weren't involved in patient care or anything, but they ran the errands. And later, we had what we called the Pink Ladies volunteers. They ran the gift shop, and they would deliver flowers to patients and so forth, like that. Yeah.
And the uniforms, how different were they at that time from the way they are today? I think I've seen pictures of nurses with the nurse hat. What were the uniforms like back then?
As anesthetists, we did not wear a cap, which we had worn as nurses, because we were always putting on those paper caps for surgery or OB. At first, we had a pink uniform, just a scrub dress. And then later, they took those away, and we wore scrubs, blue pants and shirt top. The nurses, though, that worked wore white uniforms, and they wore the cap of their school that they had graduated from.
You saw a lot of changes, though, in the hospital.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Not just the size of it, but the introduction of, new departments.
Yes.
Well, I mean, what were some of the, because we were talking earlier about when women, as they went into labor, you were put to sleep and woke up with share a little bit about that.
Well, we used an anesthetic agent that was actually explosive. So we used to put wet towels down to get rid of any static electricity. And that was called cyclopropane. But toward the end of my career, we got ethane and fluothane, which were much more convenient. And they also did not make the patients nauseated post-op. We had Pedifol for an induction agent when I first came here, and I had learned that in anesthesia school, but also when I was in anesthesia school, we were using ether for the OB patient. We also were responsible for responding to what we call Code 99. If a patient's heart stopped or they stopped breathing, we would go and intubate them, put a tracheal tube down for breathing for them. So we responded to those calls too. I think now, at times when I'm awake at night and I can't go back to sleep, and I remember when I was doing anesthesia, they get called, get up, go do a case, wide awake, but no trouble going back to sleep. I guess that comes with youth.
Well, you had to. If you didn't get back to sleep, then you didn't get any sleep for your next shift. So it was just a lifestyle you had to develop, right?
But Lakeland itself has changed so much. They tell me, I came in 56, and they tell me that Memorial Boulevard had just been paved. I don't know when that was done. There were no interstate lanes anywhere. That came later. There was not any place really to eat in Lakeland. And I'm not sure when Moss Brothers store came, but I remember when it was such a wonderful thing to go there for lunch. You could go to Moss Brothers for lunch. There was a restaurant that was out close to where Watson Clinic is now, that only opened in the winter time, I guess when tourists were here. And then later we got Foxfire, and it was, the first location was out there. There was a barbecue place, I think, way out on the west side, somewhere that you could get barbecued chicken and so forth. But eating out was not a big thing. And then there was a cafeteria that came, Morrison's, and it was downtown somewhere.
So you mentioned some of your, bowling, flying. Anything else? Did we miss any of your other hobbies or pastimes? You said you talked about you like to go boating and go to the beach.
Oh, yes, water skiing I loved.
What lakes did you water ski on?
We went to Lake Alfred for a while, but eventually we went up to Lake Agnes, and the Toys had a little cottage that they rented to people in the winter. And for a while then in the summer, we would leave the boat up there, and about 8 of us nurses would go up on the weekends, and we would rent that little cottage to stay over. Some of the doctors had homes up there. Dr. Sam Clark and Dr. Anderson each had a home on Lake Agnes. So I like to ski.
And you still like to bowl?
Yes.
How about church life or other organizations that you wanted to touch on?
I said, I think the Lord sent me to Lakeland because I had been pretty much in the party crowd during the service. And I came down here, and the Mildred, the one that became our chief, was fairly new Christian. And we started going to Wesley Memorial Methodist Church, and there was a wonderful lady. She was, at that time, close to 80, that was the Sunday school teacher. And we got in her class, and she really taught the Bible. And I had never disbelieved the Bible, but I sure wasn't a fruit-producing Christian by any means. But I finally found my relationship with the Lord Jesus there, and eventually I became a teacher, taught the senior high students first, and then a women's class. And it seems every place that I have gone, I have gotten into teaching. I've taught Sunday school now for more than 60 years. I eventually went to Southside Baptist Church and belonged there for a couple of years, and that church split. And by that time, I had moved out to Buckingham, way out north, and I visited churches around there. And when I went to Crestview, I knew one girl from bowling. I knew one from Weight Watchers. And I felt at home, so I joined that church around 1990. The first house that I built was right above Joker Marsh. I didn't build that one. I bought it in 1965. I had rented this apartment before, and I bought a house where used to be Lodwick Field. And they had built a bunch of homes there, and I lived there from 1965 until '89, and I built this big place out at Buckingham, and it got too big. I'm in Silver Lakes now. It's an over 55 community. So I am now teaching the 70 and over couples class, and it has grown and grown. Our church is really growing. We just had 2 new couples come into the class last Sunday. They were a great bunch.
So you're still seeing the growth of the community, hospital growth, and now in your community and church growth. And we were talking earlier about a newer organization, a national organization MWAN, MWAN. Tell me again a little bit about that.
Well, as I said, I saw the ad in the paper that Kathleen Van Middlesworth had put in there. She is the president of that organization. And
what's the full name of the organization?
The Royal Swans, Military Women Across the Nation. And it's mostly veterans, although I guess they would accept active military. And she was seeking women veterans, and I was curious, and I called her, and they meet once a month down at the American Legion building, and do all kind of projects for veterans. They help with baby showers for women in the military, or women, wives, and so forth. We buy supplies for them. We buy underwear and socks and donate to the Lighthouse Ministry. That's been an important part of my experience, too. I taught a Bible study down there for a couple of years. And as I said, they are young and so energetic. They have just finished being out at the fly-in at Lakeland, having a booth there and recruiting, and very active. They make me tired.
No, you are the active. I'm listening to all of these activities that you're still involved with, still contributing your time, still giving back to the community. So you don't slow down, do you?
Well, Cheryl keeps me busy. I have nieces and nephews in Tennessee and in Texas, Pennsylvania, and I keep in contact with all of them. I'm never married, but I do have family, close family. Where we lived in West Virginia, my father's family, there were several brothers that had families there, and everybody is gone from there now. So I have no contact back there.
Well, I think you probably have a great network of family and friends, right here in this community. And I hope I'm one of your new friends. And
yes. I said I'm often alone. I value my time alone, but I am never lonesome. I just am not.
You don't have time to get lonesome.
Well, and I have such close contact. I have wonderful friends.
Well, Captain Peaslee, thank you so much for sharing your time and sharing your stories. And we just want to say again, congratulations on being a Polk Pioneer. And I guess that wraps up this oral history session, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us. And please be sure to check out some of our other videos of our Polk Pioneers, where you'll learn a lot about the rich history and heritage of Polk County.